Hello all you car nuts. Welcome to another episode of West Coast Supercars and Classics. Today we're focusing on an exciting piece of news, which is, after a 20-year break, Toyota has brought back the famous Supra sports car. Big deal today. Before we take a look at the car, the big question is it a hit or a miss? Let's find out. By the way, as a special bonus today, I have some recordings of the new Supra engine. Watch the video to the end to hear that. Okay, the first thing about the car is the heart of the car, the engine. This one is in keeping with the traditional Supras. All of them in the past have had an inline 6-cylinder engine. This one is the same. It's a 3-liter engine, twin-scroll turbocharged engine, producing 335 horsepower and 365 foot-pounds of torque. Sounds good, right? That's at 5,000 RPM, by the way. Not a terribly high RPM. Well, here's the weird part. It's not made by Toyota. It's made by BMW. That's right. You heard it right. So this is a departure from the last Supra, obviously, right? The previous Supra, that legendary car, had also a legendary engine in it. It was the 2JZ GTE engine, twin turbocharged, if you remember. That car produced 320 horsepower and 315 foot-pounds of torque. That was way back in the 90s. So here we are, fast forward another 20 years, all the technology. What are we looking at? 335 horsepower. More torque, but 335 horsepower. Yes, it's going to share the same engine with the BMW Z4, or Z4 if you prefer to call it that. Anyway, that's a little bit of a letdown, right? So if you were wondering whether the new Supra was going to be a world-beating car to compete with the new NSX, for example, because that was in a similar sort of class, if you remember the first generation NSX versus the previous generation Supra, same type of class of car. So it's not going to be competing with the new NSX. The new NSX has a lot more power, four-wheel drive, hybrid drivetrain, the whole rest of it, and it's more expensive as well. We'll get to the cost in a moment. Is it going to compete with something like the Porsche 911 GT3? Nope, it ain't going to do that either. The GT3's got like 500 some horsepower, amazing track car. It's not going to compete with that either. So we'll get into some of the reasons for this later, but let's look at the rest of the car to start with. You'll recall that the last generation Supra was available in a 6-speed manual transmission. That's not going to be available on this car. The only transmission they're talking about is a ZF-made 8-speed automatic. Again, this could be a bit of a disappointment for a lot of you who want to roll your own gears, right? You don't necessarily want to have a paddle shifter. Not going to be available on this car. Also, note that it's not an automatic dual clutch transmission. It's an automatic transmission. That's what they're saying right now. That sounds about right. Being an 8-speed, that sounds about right. So it's not going to have that snappy, crazy fast shifting. Again, this is going to save money, so they're probably looking at keeping the price down on the car. Right now, I'm looking at something around the $50,000 range US dollars, which translates to about 66 grand Canadian. So we'll talk about the competitors at that price range, but let's just get on with the rest of the car. So it's a closed coupe. It's not a 2+2, it's just a 2-seater this time. The configuration apparently is a blend of the style of the outgoing Mark IV Supra, the last generation, and the 1960s Toyota 2000 GT. Let's have a look at the overall exterior design right now. I don't know, what do you guys think? Personally, the front end I think is very, very busy. I'm not really convinced that it's the most elegant thing. Going back to the previous generation Supra, it still holds up well after all these years. You know what I mean? Pretty clean styling, quite smooth, rounded edges and so on. I think they look really good still. Front end of this new Supra, it's not terrible, but I don't know if it really works all that well for me. What do you guys think? Hit or a miss? Wheel styling, I have nothing to say really about that. Nothing that spectacular in the wheel department here. I don't know what options are going to be available. So there's not many color options available for this car. Basically at the start it's going to be red, blue, silver, white, black, and gray. And there's a matte gray option available as well for more money. Apparently the first 1,500 units coming into the US are going to be launch edition models, so they'll have a special plaque and so on and so forth. It's going to be launched after the BMW Z4. The Z4 is going to be a 2019 model. The Supra is going to be a 2020 model. This is part of the joint development agreement that BMW gets that. Another thing that's going to distinguish the Z4 from the Mark V Supra is that the Z4 is going to be a roadster, but the Supra is only going to be available as a coupe. I think that's good personally because I prefer coupes. Stronger, a little bit less noisy, so on and so forth. Let's have a look at the front 3/4 view of the Supra. So looking here, you can see that the wheel size is not extraordinarily large. In fact, I think in Canada it's going to come out, and the US, it's going to come out with 18-inch rims. 19 inches is going to be an option, but it's going to come out with an 18 as a standard. I'm not sure how exactly that's going to be done because I think the launch edition is going to probably come out with the 19s. So I think the base unit's going to be the 18. If you look along the side there, you see the long hood that has kind of that clamshell design that is along the lines of the BMW designs. And looking along the side of the car, you've got a lot of sculpting going on there. Several different contours. The door looks very interesting. As you can see, there's a slat along the door where there looks like there's some airflow going in there. There's another couple of lines along the bottom, at least 3 or 4 different cut lines in the body there, if you can see that. It's quite interesting. Not sure if that's my favorite. It looks a little bit busy on the side, personally. The rear wheel well looks pretty good, I think. Reminds me quite a bit of the FRS. Also, you notice that the car has bubbles over the driver and passenger side. That's reminiscent of the 2000 GT. Apparently it helps airflow as well. Now let's look at the rear of the car. Obviously one of the major features here is the short back end, quite complex looking designs with a big rear diffuser at the bottom of it. Airflow is coming out of the rear wheel as well, as you can see, and it's coming out just underneath the tail lights. Personally, I don't really care for this big lumpy rear hatch. Funny thing is, I saw one picture of it, I'll show you that, a giant hydraulic wing coming out of it, which looks awesome, I think. Sadly, it doesn't appear that that design made it to this final production version. You can see the tailpipes are different too, and the rear diffuser on that version I was showing you. Also, I've noticed from some angles, the rear taillights look just disturbing to me. I am not a fan of the new Toyota Prius rear design. This design language that's going on with these kind of weird sculpted bulbous lights coming out. And I think the Supra rear end is similar to that. Personally, I'm just not a fan of it. I don't know if you guys like it or not. Sometimes things can be a little bit too busy. Time will tell whether this design looks dated or has to be adapted or changed or something, but we'll find out with time. All right, so let's look at the interior of the car. Well, to start with, it's not a 2+2 coupe anymore. It's just a 2-seater coupe, straightforward, with a hatch. Now the hatch opening is not that wide, although it does have a good luggage space. So, you know, you can carry a few things for your weekend getaway, etc., your golf clubs, no problem. The first thing you're going to notice looking at the top of the dash is that big TFT screen there. Well, the 8.8-inch screen is not standard. The standard screen is a 6.5-inch screen, and actually if you want a navigation system you have to go up to a premium, so that's another $4,000 or something US. That gives you a little idea of where they're trying to place this car as well, right? They're not really in the premium luxury range. They're looking more at the cost-conscious sort of market here. I think that theme goes throughout this whole car, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. The rest of the interior looks pretty decent. I don't have a huge pro or con reaction to it. It's quite traditional. The actual instrument cluster is all LCD screen. It doesn't look like there's any analog gauges on there, so you can probably configure that a little bit, but I don't know how many custom configurations there are. This is only going to have 2 drive modes. There's going to be a regular and a sport mode, from what I understand. It also will have adjustable shocks, which is nice. So, for track orientation or hard driving, you go into your sport mode, tightens up the suspension. I wouldn't have minded seeing a few more drive modes, and it's maybe a little strange to hear me say that because I was complaining about how many drive modes there are in the BMW M series and in the Mercedes AMG cars. There's just so many different settings on them. But I kind of like to see a snow setting or a wet setting, something like that, if you're in a performance car, just so you can make sure you're safe when the going gets tough. Another thing I like about having a few different settings, when you're in the sports settings, I find that the throttle response will change quite a bit and the shift points of the transmission will change. And depending on the type of terrain I'm driving in, I like to have like a sport mode that's not the full out track mode. Because I just find the shifting with these automatics is a little bit more intuitive and a bit quicker in response. Whereas if you're driving on level pavement and you're in the city, you don't really need that. You're probably going to be sitting in traffic and just kind of following traffic, so you don't need like this instantaneous throttle response. But apparently this only has the two modes. As you can see, the steering wheel is pretty conventional. Nothing jumps out at you. This to me looks kind of in the middle of the range from a pure sports car and kind of a sedan luxury car look. It's not really hitting any huge points for me at first glance. So, I don't know how you guys feel about this. Hits and misses. Do you like the exterior? Do you like the front? Do you like the back? Do you like the interior? Hit or miss? What do you think? For me, overall, I'm a little bit lukewarm about this. I think the styling is quite busy. I don't hate it, but I'm not sure if it really is going to stand the test of time and be a classic like the 4th generation Supra. On the interior, I'm pretty neutral with that. It looks fine. I'm sure it's high quality and that's important for a day-to-day driver. On the engine front, I would say that's a miss for me, at least on paper, because it's 335 horsepower. The original from more than 20 years ago was 320 horsepower. And I think for all the Supra fans out there, in order to really knock it out of the park with their reintroduction into the market, I think it should have been closer to 400 horsepower. That's just me, to try to compete with, say, the Porsche Cayman S, something like that. My understanding is that the engine actually could have produced more horsepower, but there are new particulate filter regulations in European spec cars. That goes for the gasoline cars. It's not a diesel thing. And so the horsepower of the engine is reduced from somewhere around 380 potentially to like the 335. The weird thing is, apparently the BMW Z4 is going to have the more powerful version of the engine available in North America, but the Supra initially won't. That's a complex marketing decision by Toyota to do that, and I think the big consideration in here is that they're very sensitive about the numbers of cars they're going to sell. I think this is a tough market segment, a small sports car. So by not producing as many North American spec differences, it saves them on costs, right? So they can sell the car at the price point they want. If you want to blame anybody for the fact that great sports cars are not selling all that well, blame all those consumers who keep buying the huge trucks and SUVs, because sedans are basically dying out almost right now. And sports cars are also, in a declining segment. Maybe it's because the population is aging. I don't really know what the reasons are for it. I haven't looked that far into it. But this brand new version of the Toyota Supra, I think, hasn't really so far hit the high points that the previous gen had as being like a halo car. This is not going to be a halo car. It's going to be an interesting sports car. It's not going to be like a track day killer, I don't think. It's not going to outdo your 718 Cayman. It's not going to drive past your BMW M4 anytime soon, I don't think. And at this price point, there are other really interesting track cars which might be worth considering if you're really into like the high performance sports cars. The Alfa Romeo 4C, for example, is one of my favorites. I just did a video on it. which I'll link to on this video, where I drove it on the racetrack, and it's one of my favorite track cars. It's a fantastic car. It's around the same price point as this Supra is going to come in at, but it's way more exotic. You know, it's got the carbon fiber tub, it's got the true hydraulic single clutch transmission, it's ultra lightweight, very high performance. So I think in terms of like the impact of something, I don't think the Supra is going to come up to that level. That's just my opinion about it. Let me know what you think about the car, the hits and the misses. What works for you, what doesn't. It's really an interesting day to see this nameplate come back. So great to see the Supra back on the market. What do you think Toyota is going to do with it? Are they going to make some more changes to the car? How is the market going to respond to the new Supra? Is it going to love it? Are they going to sell like hotcakes, or are they going to kind of be a meh, middle of the road thing? I guess we'll have to see. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check us out for more videos coming soon. Bye for now.